Almost 2 years to the day since Vladimir Putin launched his full-scale invasion, Russia is claiming an important victory in its war on Ukraine by taking the eastern city of Avdiivka. Video on social media shows Russian soldiers replacing the Ukrainian flag on a building in the besieged city. Another clip shows what the Russian Defence Ministry claims is Ukrainian troops under fire before they flee the area, leaving some soldiers and weapons behind. Moscow's forces have been centred on Avdiivka in the eastern Donbas region. It is close to the Russian-occupied city of Donetsk. And taking control here allows the Kremlin to push its offensive further west.
The liberation of Avdiivka made it possible to move the front line away from Donetsk, thereby significantly protecting it from terrorist attacks by the criminal Kyiv regime. Information about the advance of our troops was not made public until the enemy was completely defeated and the city was taken under our control.
Ukraine's troops have suffered from acute ammunition shortages. Avdiivka has been under heavy bombardment for the past 4 months. Russia had surrounded it from 3 sides. Some of Kyiv's forces and medical personnel are still entrenched in the basement of an industrial plant. Soldiers on the front line say Russia's advance is intended to give Vladimir Putin a boost before he goes to the polls next month.
The Russians became more active because they are on the offensive. I think they are doing it right before the elections. Before, it used to be calm here. Right before the elections, they became active, very active. Now Putin will say, look, we took Avdiivka.
Is Russia's biggest gain since the battle for Bakhmut last May. US President Joe Biden says the loss of the city is due to congressional inaction to pass a $95 billion military funding package for Ukraine. On the streets of Kyiv, there are mixed feelings about Ukraine's withdrawal from Avdiivka.
The events of this month, they are of course frustrating, but first that we should think about is our military. The main thing is to save their lives.
The withdrawal from Avdiivka was very necessary and understandable. But while we are withdrawing, Russians are pushing forward and gaining territory. So in my opinion, from this point, we should hold the lines.
Let's get some analysis now with Mick Ryan, retired military general in the Australian Army and a non-resident fellow of the Lowy Institute and at the Washington-based Centre for Strategic and International Studies. Mick Ryan, thank you for joining us. Now, can you tell us a bit more about how Russia was able to take control of Avdiivka?
Well, good morning. This was a very long campaign for Avdiivka. The Russians have been attacking it essentially since day one of their large-scale invasion in February 2022. But they stepped up their attacks in October last year. This has come at a time when the Ukrainian armed forces were focused on a southern counter-offensive and at the same time have been running short on both personnel and munitions to defend Avdiivka.
And what are the implications here for Russia after taking this city?
Well, there's implications for both sides. For Russia, it will certainly give them confidence to continue their offensive operations, which are ongoing in the south and at multiple locations in the east. But politically, this gives Putin a win in the lead up to the election, as the reporter just mentioned. But also it allows them a strategic message that Russian victory is inevitable and that those politicians in the West that don't want to support Ukraine should continue their campaign to withhold support to Ukraine.
And that timing also with the anniversary approaching. What is Ukraine now planning, given that the spring offensive didn't achieve what they had hoped?
Well, certainly at the moment, Ukraine is constrained through personnel numbers and access to munitions, not just artillery, but air defence munitions were a significant problem in Avdiivka. The Russians were able to gain air superiority in a way they have not been able to do so for a long time. But I think this is an indication of Ukraine's strategy for 2024 will be focused more on the preservation of its military rather than preservation of territory. Holding ground is important, but keeping their army fit and reconstituting it this year will be even more important still.
And those shortfalls that you pointed to just there, was the shortfalls in support from the US for a period of time there, did that have an impact there?
This has had a significant impact. The Ukrainians have had shortfalls in different calibers of munitions for some time, particularly artillery and air defence missiles. The US support is about 50% of military assistance. And it's the reason why Europeans are starting to step up. But it also means countries like Australia, despite the assistance provided already, need to step up even more to help Ukraine defend itself this year.
And finally, what's been the impact of Zelensky's speech at the Munich Security Conference?
This was very important. It was about rallying the troops in many respects, rallying the politicians of Europe, getting them to step up defence production, step up their support to Ukraine, and use this to pressure the Americans to pass this assistance bill in the US Congress. At the same time, he put the message out there that if we stand alone, Russia will defeat us. That's a very important message for Zelensky going into what will be a tough 2024.